Well, I think that I would be absolutely gobsmacked if somebody had put me on a time machine and took me like Jules Verne into the 21st century and said, this is 50 years later, this is going to be played, by musicians in Birmingham in a world premiere. I would have thought that was amazing with another piece of mine, which I've written much, much later. So the fact that it's being done in the 150th birth anniversary of Schoenberg is quite wonderful. And I'm delighted that my piece, one of my very first pieces in fact, is a 12-tone piece celebrating the legacy of Schoenberg. So I'm Param Vir and I'm a composer. I have been composing since the age of 10. I think the desire to be a professional composer arose around the age of 14 or 15. And then when I was 17 years old, I had just finished high school. My teacher, Dr. Kohlreuter, that was his name, Dr. Kohlreuter. So he gave me a copy of Anton Webern's Piano Variations, Opus 27. I don't have the score in front of me, but this is the Webern, the opening of the Webern Piano Variations. And this was a source, in a way, for my thinking about very short phrases in the piano part. It's a palindrome. One more time?
Yeah, I didn't know that was a palindrome. That's lovely.
Oh, you can hear it, look. And it goes backwards. We're back where we started. And it starts off with major sevenths and minor ninths, and it's little retrogrades that go forward and backwards, It was a very interesting use of motive and a very interesting use of harmonic material. So I used that, I thought about that, and then I wrote this piece for flute and piano, which was subsequently recently entitled 12 Tones for Flute and Piano, because that's what it is. And I used the row very, very simply and straightforward, using it both in the vertical and in the horizontal. So the piano and the flute form one composite for the use of the row. And you can follow the row very easily. So this is the 12-tone row that I use in my piece. That's how it starts. And it had these very short aphoristic pianistic phrases as well, which I had never composed before. And I took it to Dr. Kohlreuter at my last lesson with him before he left for Tokyo. I was just 17, I'd finished my school exams, and he was a flautist as well. So we played it. I played it on the piano. He had a grand piano, and he played it on his flute. And then he said to me, "This is a breakthrough piece for you, and you've finally broken into a new language, That was all. And that was it. That was the last, as it were, informal performance of it. It never had a public performance. So after I found this piece in my sketchbook, I showed it to Stefan. In fact, I brought him the manuscript, the crumbling manuscript, and said, "Stefan, I think this is a piece that could be played." And he looked at it and he said, "Yes, we'll do it." So then I had it copied. But it's pretty much the way it was when I composed it way back in 1969. Well, Schoenberg, he was already experimenting with non-tonal material, and before the 12-tone row became, a formal technique, he was just writing what we call free atonal pieces, as also were his students, especially Arnold Schoenberg. The idea is to use the 12 notes in a sequence, and they are shorn of any kind of tonal implications. But I think they're not random. I think he perhaps thought of it as a gigantic motivic structure, if you like. It encapsulates all the motives in the piece, and you can draw from it various things out of it. And of course, you can play it in retrograde, you can play it in inversion. But we know that inversions exist in tonal music as well. They're used in fugues, in centuries. Inversions, retrogrades, all these techniques were there in medieval music as well. So it's nothing new, except that the row sort of formalizes all that, formalizes relationships. There are various ways of looking at this technique critically today. I don't think I wrote many pieces in this technique. It could even be considered a bit of a straitjacket, I think. I think it's better for a composer to write much more freely. But getting into a technique like that can be exciting and interesting and useful. I remember Ollie Nuss in one of my lessons with him telling me that it's a way to drop yourself into a different zone, as it were, and experiment with that, which which you would normally not do. I mean, for instance, sometimes I might, if a friend of mine shows me his or her music, I might say, if you've never tried harmonic fields, try them, because they could be very liberating for what you're trying to do, for instance, as an example, you know. And again, that puts you in another zone, and you begin to experiment with new kinds of materials, which one should always be looking for. I don't think that you need to listen to a 12-tone piece and then say, well, I can follow that. You know, I can't follow that. I mean, some people will say that we can't really follow the 12-tone row, you know, in the bassoon, for instance, or in the trumpet. You know, you might hear. But it's not. You're not meant to, as it were, follow it the way in which you might follow a theme in a fugue. But the fact that it is there, if it's been used intelligently, it would produce a kind of a field of intervallic material which has some cohesion. I would say that's its best purpose. Well, it's very hard to make an assessment even now. I think it's important for composers to be aware of this legacy. Whether you use any of that in some way or the other is not essential, but it's hard to avoid. And there were these two titans in earlier 20th century music, Stravinsky and Schoenberg. You know. I think the danger with it is only that it can become a straitjacket, as I mentioned earlier. It should never be forgotten what Schoenberg said himself about the technique. You still have to compose as before. Having the 12-tone row and picking off the notes and then say, okay, I'm writing the 12-tone row and, you know, I'm putting this. It's not going to guarantee a good piece. If a composer came to you with shining eyes and said, I've written a piece in D minor, that's not going to impress you. It's what kind of piece you've done in D minor. So just having a piece with a 12-tone row, it doesn't guarantee anything. In fact, chances are it might not even sound very good. So you still have to compose. And you still have to make the material work, just as you have to make a scale work, you know, or you can say, I have major triads, so what? You know, you're creating an image in sound. The audience isn't interested in what technique got you there. They want to hear a wonderful sound, a wonderful image. It's about creating an image. A Spread of Dreams was inspired by Yeats' poem, which is very well known, The Clots of Heaven. And I'll just read out a few of the lines from the poem. Had I the heavens embroidered clots, enwrought with gold and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark clots of night and light and the half-light, I would spread the clots under your feet, but I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because it's tread on my dreams. It's not a physical cloth, obviously, and it's an image of qualities of light. And I thought of it very much as as a way to explore blurred images which repeat and change. And the technique of the ritornello form came to my mind, which I had never used before. So I took a section of the piece, I composed it, and then I wrote the same thing again using a harmonic template, but with different pitches. And they were both based on harmonic fields. And there's an interval of the perfect fourth that runs through the piece as some kind of stabilizing factor in the harmony. But it was an image that was somewhat blurred, and that was what I wanted to achieve in this piece. Well, the BCMG is really a family, you know. You have the players, you have the sound investors. I've been to so many concerts, not even of works by performed by the BCMG, but even in London and other places. And suddenly somebody comes and says, I'm a sound investor from the BCMG, you know. And to share the process of composing with them. Many times, in fact, with Raga Fields, I was able to come here 7-8 months before the premiere and just have a few musicians try out some of the fragments of that work, you know, just to see what the sound world is like with the sarod player. So that was very exciting. And then you get to know the players over the years. You know, you build friendships with them, some of them. And when you come back, it's always a happy feeling. Come back on that train ride from Euston to Birmingham New Street.